All right, this is the third video in this series, and we're going to get a little bit more detailed into what a script file is and how to start programming. Now, I know that word scares a lot of people off. That is okay. You don't have to understand programming or any of this to be able to use PartNester. There are built-in scripts already ready to go, and also I am here to help produce anything that you might need help producing. So these videos are to help aid in your own personal gain to be able to do and add in more features to PartNester. So again, to continue on the series, I have a file that we're going to be using, which is a very basic cabinet file. We only have two parts in there, one with a base side and one with a left side. And if you watch the other videos in the intros to the scripting, when you import a CSV file, a script file is called anytime a new part is nested. And that script file is called main. That is main.vbs, and it is inside of a subroutine for main. We do have a little helper down below. We could ignore that, and that will become familiar and understandable when we get a little bit farther into it. But we're first going to start off on understanding what a variable is. A variable is a made-up word, and I am going to just introduce it by typing the DIM that's dimensioning it, and it could be anything. This is called this made up. And then we could say made up is equal to something. So to make sure I get the spelling correct, I'm just going to highlight that, select it, and do a Control V, and call that equal to this. It's just going to be equal to the word this. And to see how this works out, we're going to use a message box to post up in PartNester when we see this. So it is MSG box, and it automatically comes up here when we're using Notepad++. And then in parentheses, I am going to type the word made up and save this file. So what is going to happen, we should see when we import that CSV file with the two parts in there, we should get a message box that pops up twice that's called made up. So coming over to PartNester, File, Open, and there is the two files, and we'll say Open. And once they are nested, we get the message box that's this, and we'll get it one more time, and then OK. Nothing is drawn or laid out because we haven't told it what to draw yet, but that is okay. We're going to build that out. So understanding variables, we just made one up here, and I'm going to delete what we just made up. That was just to show what and how a variable works. This name here, part name, is a variable as well, although it has already been equated to a value. That value is going to be based on what that part is as it's being introduced. So coming back over into PartNester and going to File, Open, selecting that same with the two parts, and select Open, and notice we have two parts in here, the base right and a base left. This time we should get the message box that says, this time we go to Nest, we should get a message box with the base right and the base left. That is the part name. So that is how variables work. The next thing we're going to look at is conditional statements. I'm going to delete the message box there, and we're going to look at two conditional statements. One is an if statement, And we're going to say if part name is equal to, currently that is nothing. And I'm going to say then, on the new line, we're going to say and if. So if, in this case, right now, if part name is equal to nothing, it's going to do whatever we have inside of here. And inside of here, we're going to enter in a message box. And we're going to call it part name. And for this condition, just to make sure that I have everything spelt correctly, I'm going to go to here, and I want it to be that base side. So if part name is equal to base side, do whatever is inside or in between the if and end if. So saving that. We already have that file loaded. So all we should have to do is go into Tools and then Nest to have that file called up again. So this time, that is the base right side. And we don't get the message box for the left side. And that is because we don't have the message box outside of this condition statement. So that is one condition statement we could use. Another conditional statement is called a select case. And then we will do an end select. So within this routine here, or within these two, we need to set up a case. So we will say case base right, and we will say case so as we go through here, it is one big conditional statement that sometimes when you have a lot of different conditions, the select case is going to be the easier one to use. So now we will say and we'll put another message box inside of the left side. Saving there. So now, when we go to renest this, it's going to call up that file again. It's going to fall within each one of those select cases and say this is the right side, just as we typed it in, and then this is the left side. So we've now understood what variables are and what conditional statements are. We've used made-up words, and we're also using the system variable part name. The last item that we need to look at in creating programming is a way to loop, to do the same thing over and over and over again with an addition. That looping is going to be used for shelf holes or anything that we need to create an array of items. So for a loop, the easiest one to use is what is called a for loop. So to use a for loop, we need to have a counter. And a counter is a variable, and typically the counter is going to be used and designated by I. Then to create the loop is going to be for, then I equals 0 to 10. And then we'll go next. So what is going to happen here, just make this a little bit more readable by putting some spaces in here. What is going to happen is every time it comes through here, I is going to first equal 0, then it's going to come next. I is going to equal 1, and I is going to keep getting incremented up by 1 until we reach 10. And to see how this is going to work, again, we will use the message box, and we'll say I is so remember, I is a variable, and I'm putting in parentheses the text. Gonna put that text together, so we should be getting a message box pop up 10 times for every part. So we have 2 parts. We're going to get it popping up a total of 20 times, and with each time we should see I being incremented by 1 every time, and then the second part start again. So going to nest this again, we should now see the message box pop up, I is equal to 0. And as we click through there, we see that counter in that I value is incrementing by 1 every time until we get to 10. Once we hit OK again, it comes back to 0 because we're on to the next part, and it's going to go through this 10 times again. So I know that was and is a fairly lengthy video explaining what programming is. We've covered what variables are, what a conditional statement is, and how to loop. We created 2 different types of conditional statements. One was an if and if statement, and the other is a select case. So with those 3 items, variables, conditional statements, and looping, is everything that we need to know to be able to further progress into creating lines and geometry to our cabinet parts within PartNester.